Good morning. Welcome to a very special Thursday edition of Building Forward. My name is Christiana Almeida. I am the Senior Project Manager here at VISIONALITY Partners. With me today is the ever fabulous Emily Barony, who is the founder, CEO, Queen Bee of VISIONALITY. And then also joining us today is very smart person, Tony Biasotti. Tony comes to us from a couple of sources, the Pacific Coast Business Times, but he has also been the lead on the Ventura County State of the Region 20 report over the past couple of years. This has probably been one of the biggest, if you love data, this is your dream thing to fall asleep with every single night. It does a really comprehensive view of Ventura County's economic health in multiple areas. So Tony has agreed to talk to us today specifically about the nonprofit sector. We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the slightly ugly aspects of this. And then we have questions available for you all at the end. And our fabulous assistant, Taryn, who's also a new hire. We absolutely love having her on the team. She just dropped the link to download that into the chat for us. But there's also physical copies available as well, Tony, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, here's a physical copy. Yeah, if you want a print copy, you can visit the Civic Alliance website and purchase one there. The download is free. I can't speak for them. There may be extra free print copies around, but generally the download's free and the print copy is $25 maybe. Anyway,
okay.
And you can order it from them. You can pick it up from them and they'll ship it to you.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a really great investment, especially I like having a copy on hand just to reference. And I've definitely used this for multiple things for our own work at VISIONALITY as well, as when we talk to clients as well. So as always, we do this in 25 minutes. So Emily and I are going to get started, and we're going to warn you guys, all three of us have dogs. So there's probably going to be barking at some point, and that's totally fine. Okay, going in 3, 2, 1, timers are going. So Tony, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're talking quality of life indicators in specifically Ventura County. Some of the indicators also reference California as a whole or Santa Barbara County, but for the purposes of this, we're primarily focused on Ventura County and looking at some of the indicators in the State of the Region report through a nonprofit lens in terms mostly of the health and equity of our staff, which I think is a really important topic for a whole bunch of reasons. And, number one, let's start talking about gender pay equity. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, the nonprofit sector doesn't pay as well as the rest of the economy. There's a chart that's on page, good question, 25 of the report, which actually this would be easy to call up. I can do this.
Yeah, and make sure we put the link to download it in the chat, so feel free to download it and follow along. This is truly one of my favorite pieces of information.
Right. I did it wrong. Okay, well, I screwed up already. I have two screens and I shared the wrong one.
That's all right.
Ta-da!
There it is. You're seeing a comparison of, yes. Anyway, as you can see here, the Ventura County, the bottom part of that chart is the entire economy, all employers, public and private sector, and the average annual wage in the county in 2020 was $63,000. The nonprofit sector, which this excludes the hospitals, just because those are different,
Yeah.
Not all nonprofits have been created equal.
Yes, it's more useful to compare them to other hospitals than to other nonprofits, right? Anyway, the average wage for someone in the nonprofit sector is $43,000, $20,000 lower than the overall average. So the gender disparity issue comes up when we look at, I'll move to that page. Overall, women in Ventura County in 2019 made about 84 cents on the dollar compared to men, which is pretty similar to the nationwide numbers on that. But I thought what we have that's pretty interesting here is we break that down by sector. And I don't know I guess I was a little surprised. I don't know. I didn't have any preconceived notions going in. I guess I was mildly surprised to see that the nonprofit sector actually has greater income inequality than the for-profit private business sector. For-profit private businesses, which is, where even in Ventura County, where most people work, is 86 cents on the dollar, and the nonprofit sector is 81.7. There is even more inequality in most government jobs, state, local, and federal. I have like my theories on that. I think the local government is kind of the least gender equitable, probably because the highest paid positions in local government tend to be police and fire, and those are not very gender equitable industries. Anyway,
I want to hop in and give a comment on this too. So as we look at the inequality as it pertains to gender pay in the nonprofit industry, the part about this that fascinates me the most is that the nonprofit sector is primarily made up of women. So the fact that we have a large percentage of a workforce that is that is female, but also has the greatest pay disparity, or a larger pay disparity compared to our for-profit sector, which probably is a little more equal in in gender hiring. This to me is very fascinating. I think this is something for our executive directors and boards to be looking at as well. Because oftentimes with nonprofits, we're seeing that men tend to be executive directors or hold higher positions, because oftentimes men are recruited out of the for-profit sector to come lead organizations as well. And women tend to be in our positions. We're the fundraisers, we're the frontline workers, we're doing program work. And so so Emily and I thought that this was a very fascinating statistic, that even though we are in a industry that is highly female, let's just be honest about that, that it also has the highest pay gap, pay disparity of many of the other lines of business here.
Well, and just real talk, if nonprofits want to compete for talent, they need to pay somewhere in the same ballpark. And also the idea that because we're doing good work, we don't need to be paid as much as our colleagues in other sectors is frankly bullshit. Period. And in fact, I'm going to go out on a limb, call me crazy, that we should actually be paid more, because we're doing really hard work. If you have to show up every single day and work with the hardest to serve populations, the most, kids with cancer, you're doing the hardest work. Shouldn't you actually get paid more to do the hardest work? Shouldn't you actually have really good mental health leave? If you're working, with mothers, shouldn't you have a good parental paid leave policy? And so I'm just gonna fight me on it. This is
but it's also not to say that the nonprofit sector isn't highly educated. That's the other problem. It is a highly educated sector. There's a lot of people in the sector, most have BAs, even though we do not require college experience, to come to work for us. But there's a lot of people that require MAs, MBAs, PhDs to work in some of these areas as well. So to me, even just the pay gap in this, I don't think this was reflected in this report. But the pay gap between level of education to the sector is probably ridiculous. So if you have a PhD in organizational management and you're working at Amgen, you're probably going to be making a ridiculous amount more, probably 3 times as much as somebody with a PhD in organizational management that's an executive director, in the nonprofit sector. So
what Emily was saying reminded me, funny story. I do work in journalism, which is an industry which is allegedly for profit, but not so great lately. At a place I worked that was part of a big newspaper, I just gave it away, a big journalism company, maybe 10 years ago or more than that. But it was in the aftermath of the recession. It was 2008, 9, somewhere in there. We had some new corporate muckety muck, C-suite level person from the corporate ownership level visit our office. And one of the questions that the local employees of this company had was, hey, they froze our annual cost of living raises, when the recession hit. When are we going to get that back? When am I going to get a raise again? And the answer, which I've heard the term psychic income before, but I had never heard it used to someone's face to tell them why they made not very much money. The dude literally said, well, we know that, you get a lot out of working in this industry, and like, it's, you're doing a lot of good. And it's like, we know you get a lot of psychic income instead of cash.
Girl, if my psychic income paid my mortgage, that would be awesome. I'd be so rich. So much of my savings account.
Yeah, it didn't go over well, but that's something I've heard people talk about in, I assume, nonprofits as well, but at least in like local journalism, usually not to the person's face to tell them why they're not making more from some guy with a, 7-figure bonus, but.
Well, and I'm also going to say, there's this immense misconception about how administrative expenses, how salaries are bad for nonprofits. What's really bad for nonprofits is turnover, by the way. That's like the most expensive thing for an organization, and it is hidden. It does not show up on your P&L.
I'm going to hop in at this point, though, because we've done an entire building forward on this. So go to our YouTube channel, find that building forward, listen to it. But we are at 16 minutes to go. So I'm going to turn the floor back over to Tony to go over our next indicator.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is very related to this is a chart that we put together on the cost of living in Ventura County. This is basically, standard rent. Actually, there's an explanation if I just scroll up. Yeah. Housing, food, childcare in a larger, if you have children, transportation, healthcare, just how much do you have to make to be able to live here? And there's different levels for, a household of one adult was a $19.25 hourly wage. Okay, the average farm job is below that. But, the average like administrative office support, sales, the majority of jobs in the county do meet that $19.25. But then you get to like, well, a single parent with one child, and the living wage there is $42 an hour. And that, most jobs in the nonprofit sector are nowhere near that. And, the cost of everything is kind of high here, but I believe that housing is what's really driving this. And I have charts I can show if you want, but, everybody kind of knows the housing situation, whether it's to own or rent. That's the main driver of this being a really expensive place to live.
And I think the important thing to remember when we're talking about a living wage is living wage is just defined as keeping somebody above the poverty line. So it's not necessarily allowing them room to have like an emergency fund saved up, to have like, that rainy day fund, but even like an opportunity to even put more money back into the economy by being able to go out every so often, or being able to like shop locally. So this is like that living wage is just to keep somebody and their child out of poverty, but not by much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, that would be good to me to learn the formulas. I did not do the calculations on that. It's kind of got like standard budgets for food. It's not what I would describe as like poverty wage, but I don't know that they've built in, excessive savings, or like you said, the kind of dining out expenses that a lot of us would like, and that kind of thing.
Or even like, do you have enough cash in the bank if your car breaks down to fix it, like, and so let's pull up those housing charts, because if people in our community aren't earning a thriving wage, their ongoing stress level, just being concerned about keeping a roof over their head, is really a lot and quite unnecessary. It's kind of cruel.
So this right here is the for sale end of the data. This is just the top chart is Ventura County home price on the top with the blue line, and the state average is the green one. And actually, we're not that much more expensive than state average anymore. It's kind of catching up. This only runs through mid 2021, because that's when we put this report together, but just extend that line. There's been no change. I bet the appreciation in home prices has slowed down a little in the past few months. I wouldn't say there's been no change, but it hasn't flattened out or anything at all. So, the median price of home was last year $840,000 in Ventura County. It's more now. You do the math, but the average nonprofit worker making $43,000 a year is not buying an $840,000 home without something extraordinary going on. So this is the affordability index for Ventura County and for some other counties in our greater region. In 2021, 27% of Ventura County residents could afford the median priced home based on, I guess they account for like 1/3 of your income going toward housing, which is kind of the standard. That's, as you can see, I mean, it's better than Santa Barbara, but it's actually, the same as the state level, but like nationwide, it's double that. It's half as many people can afford the average home here as the national average. And you can see the bottom chart there is, half of that equation is the cost of housing. The other half is what's your family income. And the median family income, our economy in Ventura County has really not been great for, ever since the recession. We did not have a real recovery the way the rest of the state and nation did. Median family income, inflation controlled, in that chart, it expresses it in $2,005, was lower in 2019 than it had been 10 years earlier. That is a couple of years old. That's the best we had last year. But so
that post-recession flat line is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was, you'd see the same thing looking at our gross domestic product, like gross county product. There was really no recovery to speak of in Ventura County. The economy between, bottoming out in the recession, like a little bit of recovery, but between say 2012 and 2020, basically flat. Any growth was just kind of inflation level growth.
Do you have a sense of, if you wanted to make this like to like a national comparison level or even just a state comparison level on recovery? Because right now it kind of looks like Ventura County is like almost like a decade behind possibly the state and even the country as it pertains to what this like post-recession recovery looks like.
I mean, I don't know about a decade behind, but it took much longer. It was only within the past few years that Ventura County recovered the job loss from 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. And the state of California, was many years ahead of that. There's a lot of healthier regions economically than Ventura County has been.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, thank you.
And then this one, rents are like basically the same story as purchase home prices. This again goes through mid 2021. Huge. The increase from 2020 to 21 was like one of the biggest on record in rents around here. And the average, I guess that's a 2-bedroom. Yeah, the average 2-bedroom last year was going for $2,400. I'm sure it's more now. And the other line on that chart is the vacancy rate, which is like very like economics 101, supply and demand. But once you see it in action, I mean, the vacancy rate is like basically zero. Anything below 5% is pretty low. And so even when Ventura County had like a 3.9% vacancy rate 10 years ago, that's still a pretty tight rental market. The fact that it's been below 2% is just an insanely tight rental market. If you're a landlord, you can kind of charge whatever you want almost, because people have nowhere, there's just not a lot of places for them to choose from.
So if you want to look at this from like an analogy standpoint, it's kind of like musical chairs, but there's 10 people who are now dancing around one chair, hoping to get their shot into that. And the person who's basically like owns that chair are like landlords in the area, can charge whatever they want once you sit in it. And that's the very interesting part. And especially once we see the turnover, that's when we see the highest increase in rents. Thankfully, we have caps in place that allow, like, once you're in your place, you can't, that you can't just get priced out on a whim. But yeah, essentially we have 10 people going for every apartment or every home right now. The other part of this chart that I thought was really interesting is if you look at this compared to the wages chart that we just looked at. So rent was stagnant from about 2008 to 2014, but it started to climb significantly in 2015, but we weren't seeing the same wage increases, at that same level. So as we're seeing wages remain stagnant, these dollars now have to purchase significantly more as it pertains to rent. So your take home is actually going down. So if anything, like the rental market and the housing market has started to create significant further income inequalities within the region as well.
Yeah, and as you can see there, like it wasn't always like this. If you're renting an apartment, the average renter in Ventura County was paying less when you adjust for inflation and everything in 2014 than they were in 2007. It was just pretty much the same. I'd be really, I'm going to watch this kind of stuff the next couple of years. I'll be really interested to see what happens. You know, at the moment, there's more new apartment units under construction in at least like Ventura and Oxnard than there's been in, I don't know, ever. I mean, yeah, Oxnard has a whole wagon wheel thing that's maybe thousands of units.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that the city of Ventura has multiple thousands of units under construction at the moment or permitted for construction. And so, you know, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on like housing economics, but like some people have an idea that, okay, if the average rent in town is $2,000 and this building opens and the average rent in the new building is $3,000, but that's not going to do anything to help the market. But that's not really true. I mean, putting more units even at the higher end just adds to the overall pool of available apartments, lowers the vacancy rate. It takes other older apartments kind of like down a notch, you know? So if another place used to be the nicest apartments in town, but this new one opens up, well, that one becomes like not affordable, but like, you know, slightly less desirable and available to a wider range of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and let's talk.
6 minutes ago.
Let's mention.
I'll talk about whatever you want then. Yeah. What's up? What's next?
Well, I need to mention too how this disproportionately affects women, and especially single women, and especially single parents who are women who need to make significantly more to stay out of poverty and are statistically paid less. And oh, by the way, they only have one income. So again, if you get laid off, you know, your safety net, your sustainability is just so much tighter when you're a single income household.
And I think it's important because this definitely plays into like a lot of the conversations that we've been having here at Visionality about thriving wages. And the State of the Region report has always been like a really good tool for us to reference. We're having conversations with nonprofits about increasing pay for employees because people tend, or boards tend to make significantly different incomes than people work in nonprofits. And so when it comes to making decisions about budgeting for staff pay increases, most boards do not understand the difference of what $150 a month can actually do for somebody compared, because it would obviously do nothing for somebody that's making like a high six-figure salary, and those people tend to be the ones that nonprofits are going after to put on their boards. But a $150 a month like increase, I know that sounds very like low because it is, but that can actually make a fairly significant difference, especially like with inflation right now and with gas prices going up. And so I actually kind of wanted to wrap a little bit on that as well. Of this is all as of mid 2021, and we're looking at a 7% inflation rate. So Tony, how does a 7% inflation rate like increase the disparities or increase just like even the numbers that we're looking at right now?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I assume that the State of the Region will continue to come out every 2 years, and I'll be doing it again next year. You know, in the past, I mean, we've just throughout most of our lifetimes, we've lived in such a low inflation environment that unless we were charting something over 10 years or more, we didn't really bother adjusting for inflation. Like, okay, last year, this year, we'll just put the dollar amounts next to each other. Was it a 1% inflation rate? Who cares? Close enough. If it's 7%, obviously that's going to change absolutely everything. And like theoretically, in the type of inflationary economy we have now, okay, like on the whole, yes, wages are going up too, but wages don't go up the same way that prices go up. You know, like the price of gasoline, you can change, like you just change the sign on the gas station and that goes up. As soon as the price of a barrel of oil goes up, price of gasoline goes up. If a company decides to raise wages to keep up with inflation, whether, you know, out of the goodness of their heart or because they need to, I mean, the thing about this with inflation, like, okay, in some ways the economy is not great, but like workers are in really high demand. You've heard of the Great Resignation. Most of those people are leaving for newer and better jobs. So if you're in an industry like that, yes, wages are going to go up, but they don't go up every day. You know, they don't go up when the price of gasoline goes up. Maybe next year you'll get a raise, or maybe you switch jobs to a higher paying job, but it doesn't keep up with, you know, inflation running at 7-8% a year. You're going to have to just bite the bullet on that for some time until you get that, you know, increase in wage if it is coming for you.
a question would be, do we want to look at asking boards and executives to consider a 7 to 8% pay increase this year across the board for their staff just to keep up, since a 3% cost of living increase is no longer a cost of living increase. It's now technically a 4% decrease in buying power.
Yeah, I mean, the very recent, like this past year is coming in at like 7% or something. That's supposed to not continue. I mean, you know, in some sense, like the fact that our unemployment is pretty low and we didn't have a massive repeat of the Great Recession during the pandemic has a lot to do with why we have inflation now. I'm certainly not an economist by training. I wasn't even an econ major. I won't get to like, don't let me, I won't talk about that because I only like know a little, but you know, there's like, we're revving up the economy with the conscious decision of this could result in inflation. Now we have to slam on the brakes. So 2022 will probably be lower inflation and lower growth. Like, I don't know if you would say like, now everybody needs a 7% cost of living, but if your employer was doing like 2%, that's not going to keep up. Or if they were doing 0%, you know, that's, yeah. If your wages are flat, then you have a decrease. Like if you're getting a 0 or 1 or 2% raise from 2021 to 22, then you will have less money.
Well, and it's interesting too, specifically in the nonprofit industry, because even before the pandemic and before the Great Resignation, we already had trouble keeping fundraisers specifically, where we saw fundraising positions turn over about every 2.5 years. And it was chasing that extra, 50 cents an hour or whatever. And so I'm just going to double down on saying, giving employees raises so that they are not super duper encouraged to look for another job is going to be the number one thing you can do for the financial health of your organization, because you're not having those turnover costs.
Right. Turnover is always costly, but in the current environment where you can't count on being able to fill that position, that's going to be, you have to think about, would I rather pay this person more, or would I rather have nobody in that position for however long, or have to,
Yeah.
Cost benefit analysis. And on that, we're at 5 seconds to go. So we nailed our 25-minute queue as always. And so we're going to open it up to, oh, that is a loud one. So we're going to open it up to questions now. You can, if you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand if you want to hop onto camera. If you want to ask something in the chat, you are super welcome to ask something into the chat. But otherwise, you have about a couple minutes here if you want to ask anything. We just kind of like, Emily and I have been like talking about this like report for quite a while now. And we've like, Emily used to help put this report together.
Oh yeah, by the way, yeah, this wouldn't exist without Emily at all. The only reason we can do without her as project manager is because she did such a great job of it for the few years that she was the project manager, that it was like she was too good. She made herself obsolete. We're like, oh, well, Emily's got this just humming. Like we could just, do it
That's
ourselves.
what a good project manager does.
Completely impossible. Yeah.
Thanks.
One of our graduated clients from way back when.
Thank y'all. I'm also curious, if we don't have any questions for you, Tony, if anyone on the call has some like lived experience that they want to share to sort of illustrate what we're talking about, or, concerns. We always get the question, well, yeah, I'd love a 7% raise. How the hell do I sell this to my board? So what do you think about that, Tony?
What do I do not have any insight on that one.
Have you asked for a 7% raise?
Kinda, yeah. I did get a promotion of sorts at the start of this year. I'm now the executive editor of the Pacific Coast Business Times instead of the managing editor. So,
and I'll just speak from our
kind of the same thing. But,
when we had this transition moment at Visionality where we were going from this teeny tiny baby startup, like scraping every penny together, to like a company with employees. And we took a step back. We looked at nonprofit wages in our community, and we gave everyone across the board a 20% raise. I did not know how to pay for that. It's not like I had that money in the bank. If I did, I would have been paying people more to begin with, but we had really high turnover. And so I was like, well, shoot, I'm paying this money anyway to rehire and retrain individuals. So I'm going to take a gamble and see if I give it to people directly instead of just wasting that money filling positions. maybe they'll stick around. And guess what they did? They did stick around.
But I think that this assessment that you did, we also did 2 years ago and did another pay increase based on that. And I think it's really important to remember that like, this is not something that just happens once. Like you have to be assessing your wages against the market every couple of years. If you want to remain competitive, it's going to help you recruit better employees. It's going to help you retain better employees. It's always just kind of this opportunity to like make sure that like what you're doing that what you're paying is equitable and reasonable, and that's not just a one and done project. That should always get checked every couple of years.
Well, and
I see someone in the chat. Oh, sorry.
if you're assessing, if you're increasing incoming employee wages, you also have to reassess existing employee wages. So we had to do a lot of that work too, where it was like, okay, I know I need to pay at least X to even get applicants for our open positions. But if I'm offering brand new people X, you better believe I need to pay my existing people who I know their capabilities more than X. And so just keep that in mind too when you're doing these assessments. And two, like, perfect is the enemy of good. So maybe you need to stair step it a little bit. And if you decide to make a 5% increase today, that's better than nothing. That's better than just sitting on your hands until you can make like the real final adjustment that you need. So a couple of thoughts, but yes, our friend David had a comment in the chat that convincing the board is easy to give raises, but negotiations with the county is a tricky ask. And I hear you on that one very much.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that that's referring to an organization where the client is the county. You can't just decide to pay more if you don't, like, even in the, I mean, you work in the nonprofit world and I don't, but it's the same as a for-profit business, except that, you know, a for-profit business wants to do better than break even, but a nonprofit still has to break even. You still can't just spend money you don't have. And so, yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is at all, but or if clients like that are building in cost of living into contracts, you know.
Yeah, the answer is diversifying your income stream and then like using the unrestricted money to make up the difference. But it is really tough when you are primarily funded by the government.
I hear ya. Okay, anything else, or are we good for the day, friends?
I think we've done it.
That's what I love about building forward. We can be done very fast. Everybody can get on with their day. It's a nice little, again, we tackled giant conversations in 25 minutes. The fact that we went through an entire economic report with a very smart human being in 25 was pretty awesome. Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for making a really great presentation on this and allowing us to just kind of like hammer questions at you about how this like impacts the nonprofit sector specifically. We super appreciate you.
I doubted Emily when she said to block out half an hour, but look at this.
We got things to do, man. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. We do this the first Wednesday, typically. If you have a topic you want to address.
What's our next one?
The next one is with our good friend, James Joyce, Coffee with a Black Guy, and we are going to talk about hiring for diversity in our community, how to make it permanent, not performative.
We love us alliterations.
Yes, so if you have topics you want us to address, shoot them over. If you want to be a guest star like Tony is on our Building Forward, we would love to give you a place to share the things that you're knowledgeable about. So with that, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Bye, friends.